morning. You're watching Inside Look. I'm Neil Mercado. Joining us in the program today is Philippine Coast Guard spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, Commodore Jay Tarriela. Sir, good morning. Thank you for giving us your time.
Good morning, Neil. It's a pleasure to be here.
I think this is the third time, sir, that we're having you in the program, no? Because mainit talaga itong issue ng West Philippine Sea. Commodore Tarriela, let's set the stage first. Kamusta ang sitwasyon ngayon sa West Philippine Sea? Meron ba tayong observed na ano yung mga observations so far ng Philippine Coast Guard over there? Meron bang increase in the presence of Chinese vessels or meron bang recent untoward incident that we reported over there?
Well, in the past few weeks, we don't have any reported incidents or even harassment of the Filipino fishermen. There is also no substantial increase of the Chinese maritime militia that we have been monitoring. There are also no swarming as of this time. So we can fairly say that right now we haven't really monitored any incidents that is pretty much concerning for the West Philippine Sea.
Sir, let's talk about resupply missions because isa yan sa mga involvement ng Philippine Coast Guard. Kamusta yung huli nating resupply mission? And for the information of our viewers, can you explain kung ano usually yung mga protocols during these resupply missions and ano ang role ng Philippine Coast Guard during these missions?
Well, first of all, the resupply mission in Ayungin Shoal is pretty much a military operation. The role of the Philippine Coast Guard is to provide security escort to the resupply boats that are being used by the armed forces of the Philippines. The last time we had our resupply run in Ayungin Shoal to support our troops on board BRP Sierra Madre was last December 10 of last year, wherein we experienced water cannoning from the Chinese Coast Guard vessels.
Let's talk about that, Commodore Tarriela. Ano ang protocol for the Philippine Coast Guard and perhaps the military as well when it comes to these instances? Kunwari, let's go back to that water cannon incident in December. Kapag may mga ganong incident, what is the response of the Philippines?
Well, on the part of the Philippine Coast Guard, to be honest, I cannot speak for the armed forces of the Philippines. But on the part of the Philippine Coast Guard, we were given explicit instruction from the Commandant of the Philippine Coast Guard, Admiral Ronnie Hilgavan, and of course, with the guidance of the National Security Advisor and the President Bongbong Marcos, to have maximum tolerance, especially in responding to this kind of bullying from the Chinese Coast Guard and the Chinese Maritime Militia. You can see it from the previous resupply operation. There are already different instances that these Chinese vessels carried out different aggressive maneuver to prevent the Philippine Coast Guard in securing the resupply boat. But we never responded. We just outmaneuvered them, and we focused on our mission in ensuring that the resupply boats will be able to reach Ayungin Shoal. And on those instances that they are hitting us with water cannon, we don't respond with water cannon. We just make sure that we're not going to be directly hit that would damage the vessel.
Maximum tolerance, sir. Let me highlight that. How do we define maximum tolerance? Hanggang saan ang threshold ng Pilipinas pagdating sa mga ganitong mga insidente?
Well, for the Philippine Coast Guard, we have what we call the rules on the use of force. We're not expected to use force in this kind of situation, unless otherwise, a use of force will also be used upon the Philippine Coast Guard vessel. But in those instances that they're only going to make use of water cannon, using water, or carrying out dangerous maneuver, these are acts of China Coast Guard and the Chinese Maritime Militia that still doesn't allow the Philippine Coast Guard vessel to respond using force.
Perhaps the question of the public na Commodore Tarriela is hanggang kailan natin nahayaan na ganito yung reaction ng China? Sure, we can observe and we can use maximum tolerance pagdating sa mga ganitong mga insidente, but an argument can be made that by using maximum tolerance or by observing maximum tolerance in incidents like these, we're allowing China to do this over and over again because they see that we are not responding.
Well, first of all, let me first clarify your statement. We are not allowing China to do this. That is the very main reason why we have launched a transparency initiative. We believe that by documenting this aggressive action of the Chinese Coast Guard and the Chinese Maritime Militia, we are actually damaging the reputation of China as a country in the international community. We are not allowing it per se that we are not, being provoked or use force. No, our action through right information and diplomatic approach in responding to aggressive behavior of China has been very effective. We cannot counter them with the same amount of force or the same amount of aggression. We have to go back with the danger of the guidance also of the president to make sure that we are not going to escalate the tension. As much as possible, the tension should always be toned down.
Sir, we don't want to escalate the situation over there at the West Philippine Sea, but if you're going to look at it, and frankly speaking, um, an argument can be made that it is China that is escalating the situation there by
Yes,
reacting aggressively over there in the
yes.
West Philippine Sea. So I
That
guess the
that is
question
our
is,
intention, to show the world that the bully country here is China, and we're not allowing them to be bullied. What we are doing is documenting it and telling the world that these are illegal actions of China, and they have been hurting diplomatically. Uh, they have been condemned by the United States, the European Union, and majority of the G7 countries. Every time they do this, are always condemning and criticizing China because of this behavior. So at the same at the same time, we cannot expect the Philippine Coast Guard, you know, um, responding with the same level of force that the Chinese Coast Guard are doing. As you can see, with the size of the Coast Guard vessels that we have, with the limited number of Coast Guard vessels that we're also deploying, how can you expect that the smaller Coast Guard vessel will equally respond with the force that they are pushing for the Philippine government?
so the Philippines will not respond in the same level of force that China is responding, sir. Maximum tolerance, we hear you, sir. But is the strategy working?
Well, it is working, definitely. The mere fact that the international community has already expressed their support for the Philippine Coast Guard, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, to continuously receive capability development assistance, and of course, the other countries, not just the United States, but even Japan, Australia, Germany, has been supporting the Philippine Coast Guard and the Armed Forces of the Philippines, and even strengthening our bilateral alliances with all this country. This is the result of the transparency initiative that we have been espousing. This may be a David versus Goliath conflict, but definitely we're not responding to their equally responding to their threat or use of force. But the mere fact that we're telling this to the world, more countries are supporting us. Um, you know, uh, i- in terms of capability and support, the Armed Force of the Philippines has been receiving a lot of assistance from different countries for us to be more capable and credible in defending our own water.
Sir, by garnering the support of other countries, you mentioned na isa yan sa mga current strategies of the Philippine Coast Guard and the Philippine government. Are we expecting na in a few years, by using this strategy that you are mentioning, iiwan ng China itong West Philippine Sea? Because
Well,
pwedeng yun yung maging indicator of whether or not this strategy is really working. Because if we're getting the support of the international community, but China remains in our waters, can we really say that our strategy is working?
well, before I respond to that question, since this has been the line of question that you would like to have, the other question is: do you really want the Philippine Coast Guard or the Armed Forces of the Philippines to equally respond to the threat of China? Nobody would really want to say that yes, we need to bring out our guns to fire them back, because nobody really wants to go to war. Not even the president is willing to do that. It's because we know for a fact that there's no chance that we're going to win any armed conflict with China. This is the very reason why we are maximizing our diplomatic relationship with other countries, and also this is the approach that we have been using to make sure that the international community will challenge China. If the question that you were asking is, are we going to be successful in the next coming years? I hope so. With my fingers crossed, I hope so. Otherwise, there's no other approach that we can make use in going head to head with the number of vessels that they have, with the fighter jets that they can deploy, and with the military capability that they can really strong arm the armed forces of the Philippines and even the Philippine Coast Guard.
Interesting point that you raised there, sir. Military capability, infrastructure. So let's talk about that, sir. I believe na-restore, no, na yung inyo, or at least na-restore yung mga budget cut doon na binibigay dito sa Philippine Coast Guard to improve yung ating response dito sa West Philippine Sea. Sir, can you give us an idea how the Philippine Coast Guard will be using this budget to help our efforts in the West Philippine Sea?
Well, first of all, in terms of the acquisition of the Coast Guard vessels, before we only have two offshore patrol vessels, but right now, under the leadership of our Senate President, Senator Mig Subiri, the House Speaker, Martin Romualdez, and of course, with the concurrence of the President Bongbong Marcos, the Philippine Coast Guard now it's already on the pipeline for the acquisition of 5 more offshore patrol vessels of the Philippine Coast Guard. And then in terms of the intelligence fund, before, since 2010, the Philippine Coast Guard is only receiving 10 million pesos. But now we have substantially received 200 million intelligence fund for the Philippine Coast Guard. Again, this is not just limited for the West Philippine Sea. There are other Coast Guard functions that we need to make use of this in terms of maritime safety, environmental protection, and maritime law enforcement.
Itong 5 more vessels that we are going to acquire, sir, is this enough to boost our efforts in the West Philippine Sea?
Well, how do we define enough number of vessels? I mean, in the Philippine Coast Guard, we only have 10 44-meter vessels that we have been have received from Japan through ODA, and we now have 2 offshore patrol vessels. We are surrounded with waters, but still we make use of it. We optimize the number of deployment of these vessels in different parts of the country. As to the 5 offshore patrol vessels, it may not be enough, but again, we just have to make use of what we have and to optimize its deployment.
Sir, I would like to get your comment on the statement of the Chinese ambassador to the Philippines, Wang Shilian. Kagabi to, no, binigay niya itong comment na ito. He's asking the Philippines to, quote, meet halfway and effectively address maritime disputes through dialogue and consultation and jointly uphold peace and stability in the South China Sea. Can you comment on that, sir? Particularly on the term meet halfway, because personally, sir, frankly speaking, once I read this, parang meet halfway. If we're claiming that this West Philippine Sea is ours, what is there to compromise?
Well, I don't really want to put details on the statement of Ambassador Wang Xilian, but in terms of negotiation, in terms of bilateral talk with China, I think the Philippine government, since during the time of the former President Duterte, the Philippine government has exerted so much effort in negotiating and making the peaceful means of settling the dispute with China. And also with President Bongbong Marcos. I think one of the just last year, China has been one of the first countries that President Bongbong Marcos visited last January of 2022. But eventually, a few weeks after he arrived here in Manila, there were still reported aggressive behavior by China Coast Guard harassing Filipino fishermen. And then a month after, we had the military-grade glacier incident. So on the part of the Philippine government and for the Philippine Coast Guard, it is not us who's escalating or provoking China. We are actually, as I said, we have been just receiving. We are just been on the receiving end of the aggression of the China Coast Guard and the Chinese Maritime Militia.
Yun nga interesting dito sa events na ito, sir, no? China is saying that we are crafting the South China Sea Code of Conduct, and using their own term, they're saying that the process and the dialogue regarding the South China Sea Code of Conduct is going smoothly. We also had the supposed agreement between Chinese President Xi Jinping and President Marcos regarding meeting halfway pagdating dito sa issue ng South China Sea. Yet these aggressions keep on happening. Why do you think that is the case, sir?
Well, I cannot really speak for the Chinese government. What is their end goal in persistently continuing this aggressive behavior in the West Philippine Sea? But on the part of the Philippine Coast Guard and of course the National Task Force West Philippine Sea, we are really hopeful that in the next coming months, the Chinese government would eventually realize that there's no point in being aggressive and provoking the Philippine Coast Guard and the Armed Forces of the Philippines in the West Philippine Sea, considering the fact that the reason why we have been patrolling and maintaining our presence in the West Philippine Sea is for us to provide the supply to our troops on board BRP Sierra Madre and those other islands that we have been occupying. And then secondly is also to safeguard the interests of our Filipino fishermen. Those are the only two reasons why we have been, maintaining our presence and patrolling our waters. We are not there to agitate or provoke any other claimant states as they are claiming.
Sir, let me quickly touch on the Taiwan issue a bit here. I'm for sure you know about the Philippine ambassador to China being summoned by the Chinese government over President Marcos, congratulating Chinese President-elect or Taiwan President-elect Lai Ching-te. So are there concerns that these recent developments between China and the Philippine relations would escalate the events in the West Philippine Sea?
Well, I don't want to speculate, but I would just like to comment on the statement of the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China. I think the Defense Secretary, Secretary Gilbert Chodoro, has already given his statement about the gutter branding of a statement of the spokesperson. But on the part of the Philippine Coast Guard, we are still going to support the National Task Force West Philippine Sea and the the Defense Department as to whatever preparation that we're going to carry out, supposing that there will be a much more aggressive response on the part of China because of the statement of the president.
For sure, sir, the Philippine Coast Guard, mayroon kayong mga policy recommendation to the Philippine government based on your first-hand experiences in the West Philippine Sea. I'm curious to know, sir, ano yung mga policy recommendations natin sa ating mga mambabatas and to the Philippine government na rin?
Well, I don't want to publicize the policy recommendations or the operational recommendations that we have been presenting to the National Task Force West Philippine Sea. So I hope you'll understand.
Oh, no problem, sir. Let me ask this question lang, sir. This is what I'm most interested in. Let's talk about narratives. Kasi China has its own version of their truth. The Philippines we have our own version of our truth. But the thing is, these two truths that these two countries have, they're clashing against each other. So how do we go beyond narratives? How do we go beyond China saying, this is what's happening, and the Philippines responding with, no, this is what's happening, we have the arbitral ruling, and so on and so forth. How do we go beyond narrative, sir, in this fight in the West Philippine Sea?
Well, I think in terms of the battle for who really holds the truth in narrative, I think we have been very effective in doing that. Our approach in embedding journalists, whether members of the international media or the local media here, is one of our best approach in dominating this battle of narrative. As I've always been mentioning this, the Philippines is a democratic country. We do not dictate to our journalists or the media whatever story that they're going to write. So the mere fact that our journalists and media personalities that are embedded every time we have this mission in the West Philippine Sea are reporting the factual narrative. This is the reason why it's easier for us to say that we hold the truth, and those stories that the Chinese have been releasing are just made up or half-baked truth or self-serving truth. Um, as long as our journalists and media will be bringing out their cameras and videos, that will always be our strongest tool in dominating this battle of information.
Sir Commodore Tarriela, to wrap up this interview, let me ask this question. Is the Philippines winning the fight for sovereignty in the West Philippine Sea?
Well, our transparency initiative, when it was first launched, there are two main objectives that we have in mind. The first one is to provide the right information to the Filipino people. We believe that with the right information, we can be able to unite our country, since this information will also ignite patriotism among the Filipino people. Looking back since last year until now, with the result of survey saying that 6 out of 10 Filipinos now support the approach of this administration in responding to the West Philippine Sea. I think we were already met this objective. Second objective is for us to garner support through the international community. We, without any doubt, the Philippine government cannot do this alone. Cannot just directly respond to whatever threat and aggression of China. The only way that we can hopefully make a deviation of behavior of China is for the international community to persistently condemn and call out the aggressive and illegal action of China. Since then and now, these two objectives, as you can already know, are pretty much obvious. So, if our fight for sovereignty is telling the right story, dominating the narrative, I think we are winning, and that is very effective.
My final question, sir. You mentioned surveys. I'm for sure you know about the recent story about Filipinos preferring for the Philippine government to work with the US to resolve this issue in the West Philippine Sea. Kanina, you mentioned din, yung isa sa mga strategy natin being getting the support of the international community. So, is this the direction that our strategy when it comes to responding and acting on the issue of the West Philippine Sea, is this where we are headed strategy-wise? Working
This
more
is
with
just
ally countries and so on?
this is just one of the strategies that we have, but definitely our main end goal as well is to modernize the armed forces of the Philippines. For our, a sovereign state like us to have a credible defense force for the armed forces of the Philippines and to also have a modernized Philippine Coast Guard. But of course, with the limited resources that we have, with the limited budget that our national government can provide for the armed forces of the Philippines, this is the very reason why we are reaching out to like-minded states that still believe in the rules-based order to support the armed forces of the Philippines and the Philippine Coast Guard to make sure that we're not going to be alone in condemning and fighting the Chinese aggression in the West Philippine Sea.
Sir, magkakaroon ba ulit ng resupply mission anytime soon dito sa ating mga naval bases in the West Philippine Sea?
Well, definitely there will be resupply missions, but as to the exact date, I'm not authorized to disclose this to the public.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time, sir. That is Philippine Coast Guard spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, Commodore Jay Tarriela. Sir, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
That has been your Inside Look. Join us again next time. I'm Neil Mercado. Thanks for watching.